Hey everybody, and welcome to Morning Coffee. It's your girl Tammy with your daily encouraging word. So today we're just gonna hop right in on it. I know that on yesterday I let you know that we were gonna start talking about worship, and just get a deeper understanding of what worship is, and looking in the Bible to see examples of how worship can change your life. Worship can change your circumstances. Worship can bring healing. Worship can do a lot of things. Now, on yesterday, I was saying, a lot of us, when we think about worship, we think about a song. Or a slow song, or we think about a worship service. But worship is so much more than that. It's so much more than a song. So, first, I want to give you the definition of worship. Worship means a feeling or expression of reverence or adoration for a deity. It is to regard with great respect, honor, or devotion. So, just looking at that definition alone, it's much more than a song. It's a feeling of adoration, it's a feeling of respect for something greater, for that deity, which for us would be God. We have respect for God, we have reverence for God, we have adoration for God. And out of that, comes actions. So in our actions, we show reverence, we show respect, we show adoration to God. So I want you to think about that as we at that definition. Think about that definition as we look at the different examples in the Bible. So the first example that I want to look at is going to be, excuse me, out of Acts 16, and we're looking at Paul and Silas. Now, Paul and Silas had just been thrown into jail. They were severely flogged. You'll see the Bible say a lot flogged, which really means just beaten. Severely beaten and placed in jail. And I pick up at verse 25. So this is Acts 16, starting at verse 25. And if you have time, for time's sake, I'm just going to read a few verses, but you can actually read that whole section that starts at verse 16 all the way through 39 to get the full story. But just in a nutshell, they were in prison. They had just been severely flogged, put in prison. The jailer was there watching over them to make sure they did not escape. And here they are in verse 25. About midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the other prisoners were listening to them. Now, you have to understand, too, this was a great act of worship. Now, they had just been beaten for the cause of Christ. They were preaching the good news, and they were punished simply because they were preaching the good news. And even though they had just been severely beaten and placed in jail, they could have been complaining. They could have been, focusing on their wounds. They could have been doing all of that. But instead, they decided to worship. Instead, they decided to give adoration to God. They actually, if you go up a few verses, it said that they felt honored. Even though they had just got beat, they walked away, or they went away rejoicing that they suffered for Christ. They went away rejoicing. Now, I don't know about you, but if I had just been severely beaten with rods, okay, and put in jail, my feet are in stocks, I don't know if my first inclination would be, oh, let me just worship God, or to be celebratory in my mind. And that's just transparency right there. I don't know if I would feel that way after being severely beaten and placed in jail. But this is where they were. This is how powerful their worship was to God. And it says, and I'll read it again, 25. And about midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the other prisoners were listening to them. And this is what happened out of an act of their worship. It says, suddenly, and this is verse 26, Suddenly there was such a violent earthquake that the foundations of the prison were shaken. At once all the prison's doors flew open and everyone's chains came loose. Now I'm going to stop right there for a second because Paul and Silas, now mind you, they're in jail. There's a bunch of other people in jail with them. Paul and Silas were the only ones singing these hymns and giving adoration to God. But out of their worship, everybody was set free. That is so powerful. Out of their worship, not only were they set free, but everybody that was around them, that were listening to them, that were hearing these hymns and songs, they were set free. It says every chain was broken. It says at once all the prison doors flew open and everyone's chain came loose. Worship breaks chains. That is powerful. And then it says the jailer woke up, and when he saw the prison doors, he drew his sword and he was about to kill himself. Now he's thinking to himself, I'm in trouble because all the prison's doors are open, all the chains are broken, all these people are about to go free, and I'm responsible for keeping them bound. He's about to kill himself. But instead, Paul says, and this is verse 28, but Paul shouted, do not harm yourself. We are all here. The jailer called for the lights, rushed in, and fell trembling before Paul and Silas. He then brought them out and said, sir, what must I do to be saved? So in this example alone, in this instance, this few little verses here, it showed us the power of worship. Worship not only freed Paul and Silas, it freed all of the jailers that were there. It brought salvation to the jailer. So in that little instance, their decision to worship God instead of complaining, instead of worrying about their wounds, instead of, grumbling and complaining because they were in jail and had just gotten beaten. Instead, because they decided to worship, they ended up setting captives free. They ended up bringing salvation to a jailer, which is just awesome. Just reading that and seeing the power of their decision to worship is awesome. So that's my encouragement for you today. And we're going to be looking at some other examples as we go through the week, but that's the first example that we want to look at. The power of worship, even when you're in situations that are unfavorable, when you decide to worship, not only will it set you free, but it will set everybody else around you free. So be blessed with that thought today, and we'll see you again tomorrow.